Hi everyone! Today I'm going to talk to you a bit about religious symbolism, how you might go about thinking about choosing symbolism, how that works, what kind of imagery works for you when it comes to connecting to the divine and building a spiritual practice, and so on. I'm going to actually be taking a little bit of a break from the channel and from Heart Story in general over the Christmas period. So there might be maybe a week and a half or maybe even 2 weeks where I won't be putting up any videos. But I wanted to get one of these videos in this Paving Your Own Path series out before I went on that break. So as usual, I've already written a blog post on this topic and I will link that below. So far I've been doing a video on the same topic as the blog post that I've written, but I'm imagining that the content is going to start diverging the further into it that I get, but I'm kind of covering the basics to start with, and then I can start kind of answering specific questions that people have and so on and so forth. So I'll link that blog post below, and I will also create a playlist for the Paving Your Own Path video series, and I'll link that below in the description as well. So just quickly before I begin, I will just define what I actually mean by religious symbolism. I'm being quite broad when I talk about this, and I really mean anything from a word, a concept, an image, a symbol such as a cross or a pentagram or anything like that, a group of concepts. So for example, Maiden, Mother, Crone, the Holy Trinity, any of the many kind of triads and combinations of figures that we see in various different religious traditions, or an entire story or an entire mythological story, or even an entire mythological canon. There's really kind of quite a broad scope for what religious imagery and what religious symbolism can actually be and can actually mean. Generally, when I talk about religious symbolism, I'm thinking about specific, simple enough concepts that you can draw together and that will create some sort of picture, when put together, of the universe for you and of the divine for you. So that when you kind of break the divine into its most basic components, this is what you're left with. And these symbols are the best way of expressing what you're left with. This can be multi-tiered as well. You can have like one symbol that is really potent to you for representing the divine. So for example, if the divine to you is, if the most salient concept is connectivity, connection, that's what the divine is for you. That can be your core concept. Your core symbol might be something as simple as a circle. And that's your basis. But then you can break that down further and, for example, then into like a binary system of creation and destruction. And then further and further into that as well. So you might want to have, like I say, kind of overarching religious symbolism that kind of gives you that sort of, this is the basic, this is the core of it. This is as simple as it gets. And then you might want to have a slightly more complex sort of worldview or picture of the universe that you put together by drawing together these different symbols. And this can get quite complex. You might want to have a sort of cosmic symbolic structure where you have a couple of different core concepts and symbols or imagery that kind of explains cosmos to you. So for example, with say the idea of creation and destruction, in order to symbolize creation and destruction, you might have two deities, or just two symbols, or just two concepts like time or birth or anything like that. And then you might want to get into the nitty-gritty of incorporating the earth into that symbolism, and you might want to say have different imagery on the earth that kind of represents maybe things in cosmos in general, and then tie in with those kind of ideas that you have, that picture that you have of the universe. So, you know, like the earth, water and air, or sky, those three things might represent three things that you can see reflected in cosmos. Or say the image of the tree might be particularly relevant for you. That might be an image for you that connects you to the divine. So then when you have an image of a tree, it might represent a lot of things that happen on earth for you. For example, the ecosystem and the connectivity of everything here on earth, and the kind of connection between the earth and the sky and water, because everything kind of comes together in this tree. It might be a representation of creation and destruction, with the leaves kind of blossoming and falling and feeding back into the earth and being subsumed back into the tree again. And also the tree might be an image of the world tree. It might be an image of the divine. It might be sort of more representative of that kind of overarching core kind of idea of what divinity is and what the universe is, if you see what I mean. So that's just one example. So when you're building a spiritual practice or a religious practice, the first port of call was, of course, figuring out how you feel about divinity, and that's something that I covered in my first video in this series. Once you've done that, you need to start thinking about how you're actually going to express that devotion, how you're going to express the feeling that you have about the divine, and express that impulse that you presumably have to revere and to connect and to in some way be religious or be spiritual. Choosing your own religious symbolism just really isn't an issue that arises when you are part of any sort of major religion, or even a part of a set pagan tradition, such as Wicca or any of the many neo-pagan traditions that have sort of arisen, whether they're Reconstructionist religions or what have you. So if you're kind of quite secure in a religious label, if you kind of fit in with a set religious practice, then you might actually find that you've never really thought before too much about the kind of religious symbolism that you are surrounded by, and why that religious symbolism actually appeals to you, and what it actually means to you. If you've grown up in a religion, then the chances are that the religious symbolism you're surrounded with isn't actually the best fit for you. And this may actually be the case as well if you've fallen into a religion that you've chosen subsequently to your upbringing. You may have kind of fallen into a religion at a certain point because it appealed to you, because the belief system appealed to you, because the community worked for you, or whatever many reasons that people do end up changing religions. But if you actually start thinking about the religious symbolism attached to that religion, you might find that actually it doesn't actually sit with you as well as you thought it did, or maybe it just has a lot of things that it can show you about how you really feel about spirituality and religion and the divine and your spiritual practice and so forth. So I would definitely suggest that even if you're not in a place where you are building a religious practice from scratch or a spiritual practice from scratch, that you do have a look at the religious symbolism in your life and in your practice, and have a think about what that means to you, what it expresses about your inner self and your core beliefs and those kinds of things, and really kind of spend some time pulling that apart and thinking about that. I would suggest that when you're building your own spiritual practice from scratch, that you don't jump in too quickly into committing yourself to one particular way of practicing, one particular kind of religious system or religious kind of set of symbols or images. I would suggest that you really keep your mind open and that you explore a lot of these ideas. Anything that grabs your interest at all, definitely explore it and do try it out, but don't start narrowing your field of vision too soon. For example, you might be drawn to neo-paganism and Wicca in general, and you really don't know where to start, how to start building a practice, and you've come across a book that tells you how to cast a circle. I would say absolutely go ahead and cast that circle and do that a few times and see how that feels for you. But after you've done that, maybe take a break from that. Take a break and do things a different way and see how that feels too. Because when you're doing something like casting a circle, you might be thinking to yourself, this is how neo-pagans do ritual, and these are the kinds of images that neo-pagans use. And because neo-paganism has called to me, these are the images that I need to use as well. And a lot of the time, people who are kind of beginning into a spiritual practice will get very bogged down in all the kind of different details that come along with that symbolic system of, for example, the circle. And it can be easy to actually forget how much you're actually committing yourself to in terms of religious symbolism simply by choosing to use a set formula such as the circle. I mean, for example, when you're casting a circle, you're generally assuming an awful lot about, you're going to be probably calling on the quarters, on the elements. You're going to be making some sort of assumption about the elements, first of all, being a thing that is important to you on a spiritual level. You're going to be connecting them with the 4 quarters. Again, this is something that you're kind of assuming that it is meaningful for you on some level. You're going to probably there's going to be something about the goddess and God if you're casting a circle in a Wiccan way. So then you've got that kind of female, male, or feminine, masculine kind of binary symbolism of the divine. You might have all sorts of other symbolism going on in there. Even the casting of the circle itself suggests that you have a belief that you can direct energy through a hand, through a wand, and all of that kind of thing. And I think that is all well and good, and I think it's absolutely fine to go ahead and start using this practice and start using these kind of images and symbolism. But think of it as being kind of a trial run, and really pay attention to how each of those symbols make you feel. And if you're looking at a circle casting and you're kind of thinking, well, I'm not really sure how all of these symbols tie in with how I see the world, how I see the universe, and things like that. You're just kind of going along with it because it's what other people are doing. I would say, don't do that. If you're not sure about the elements, but you want to cast a circle, well, go ahead and cast a circle without the elements. Go back to basics and see what you can pull out of those core beliefs that you have ascertained when you thought about the divine, and then see if indeed the circle casting method that you're looking at can actually be applied to that. So I would definitely suggest, like I say, that you explore loads of different options at this time, and if you are looking into circle casting, that you also maybe try different other methods of religious devotion as well. Have a look at major religions and what they do in order to connect to the divine. For example, prayer beads or rosary beads and things like that. Particularly with what people do in their own homes, what kind of altars they have. Have a look maybe at Hindu altars and home practices and things like that, and find out what people actually do in other traditions as well, because you might find that just because paganism has called to you, there are probably a couple of different things about its imagery that fit your beliefs and that fit your understanding of the divine, but they're not all going to fit. And if you start looking at other traditions and other symbolic systems, you might find that actually some of them fit an awful lot better. I would say that when it comes to throwing yourself wholesale into spiritual practice or doing ritual, that there are kind of 2 different approaches that you can take to incorporating all the different interests that you have in different sort of traditions and practices. You can kind of go into it where you will replicate all the different models that you find of symbolic imagery and symbolic practice, and that you actually go through all of those and engage with them wholesale and maybe try to attach your beliefs onto those symbolic systems. So for example, if you're looking at the circle and you're not sure about the elements or the 4 quarters or maiden, mother and crone or whatever kind of symbolic systems come along with that kind of formula of practice and belief, have a think about how you might actually look at your own beliefs and tie them into that. Have a look at the 4 elements and think, okay, well, what does that actually mean to me? Don't just read it from a book and think, well, this is what other people think. Really, really think about what those symbols evoke in you, and from there, think about what they might actually be, what they might actually mean. The other alternative kind of way of going about it is to strip everything back and not to actually engage in any very complex ritual from the beginning, but to kind of go in really kind of basic and simple. Start with, say, your core belief, and say making an altar with 1 candle on that altar to represent that core belief, and just building it from there. I wouldn't say that either of these methods, that one of them is better than the other. I think it will probably depend on the person whether you want to kind of throw yourself into various types of practice and various sets of symbolism and imagery, or if you want to really scale it back and start from scratch and build it up from there. you might even want to try it both ways. You might even want to spend a couple of weeks or a couple of months casting circles and really engaging with the symbolism that comes with that, and seeing how that feels for you and how that is actually fitting with your belief system. And then maybe scaling back completely and taking a couple of months where, like I say, you set up an altar space, you put on a candle, and you just literally build up the imagery and the symbolism piece by piece. So the way that might work is that you start off, say, with your one idea about the divine. So you might have a belief that the divine is connectedness, or that the divine is love, that it is source. Just any sort of really simple belief like that is a great place to start. So you might want to light a candle every day or every week and sit with that candle. And just keep it really simple. You can just sit and look at the candle and contemplate the divine or meditate, and just keep that really, really simple. And then you might want to think about what kind of symbolism and imagery can be attached to that very simple idea. And that's where you can start kind of spreading out your tentacles a bit and thinking about, well, what interests me? What religious paths and practices have kind of grabbed my attention? So say, for example, you're drawn to paganism, and you're not the kind of person who wants to just jump straight in and start casting circles or start worshipping multiple deities or what have you. You might want to have a look at paganism and think, what is the main thing that really drew me to paganism? Is it the wheel of the year? And is it that sense of getting in touch with the connectivity of everything, and the kind of the circle of life, and the coming and going of creativity and destruction? Is that what I'm interested in? Or is it actually the kind of the binary imagery of the god and goddess in Wicca, for example? Are you drawn to a sort of duality in the divine, and is the symbolism of male and female particularly potent for you? Or is it, the triple goddess, the maiden, mother and crone? Is that important for you? Is it the moon? Whatever one major thing in that religious practice or tradition that really stands out for you, pick that one image or symbol and work with that. Just work with that for, again, a few weeks, a few months, however long it takes, until you feel like you've just really gotten to grips with what that means to you, and how it fits in with your beliefs, and how it can fit in with your daily life, and how it can kind of affect the kind of flow of your life and the flow of your spiritual feeling. So you might want to find an image that resonates with you, that connects with that image. You might want to print that out, place it on your altar. So just candle, one image, that's it. You might want to find a poem, a piece of poetry, a line, a prayer, whatever it is that is directly connected to that one image or that one symbol, and start saying that every day, sitting at your altar, saying that every day. And like I say, either just sitting in contemplation or meditation or whatever feels best for you. And then beyond that, you can just kind of keep going. So I think that either way you go, you will probably find yourself in the same place. Like if you approach developing your religious symbolism from a place of just trying out loads of different things and being a magpie and throwing yourself into different traditions at different times and seeing how it feels, you will probably eventually settle down into realizing what imagery and what symbolism kind of fits you best and makes you feel most connected and most reverent. And similarly, if you take it kind of the slow, solid kind of building it up gradually way, you will definitely end up at a place eventually where you have built up a system of symbols that kind of overlap and work with each other. Another thing I would say about choosing religious symbolism is that you don't have to just pick from one tradition. You don't have to just only use Christian symbolism, for example. Like, you don't have to use only pagan symbolism, and you definitely don't have to use all of the symbolism of one religious practice, and you can definitely pick and choose from different religions. Now, okay, some people are going to tell you that this is not a good thing, that like some people have problems with the idea of cultural appropriation and things like that. But I think that as long as you're doing this in a kind of conscious way, and that you're not sort of, I don't know, just choosing a totem animal and then saying that your religious practice is in some way Native American, or you know what I mean? I think as long as you're sort of respectful and conscious and aware of what you're doing, I definitely don't see any problem with that whatsoever, because frankly, what goes on in your mind and on your altar and in your religious practice is really your own, it's really your own agenda. It's your own business. And the most important thing when you are building up connectivity, when you are building up a relationship with the divine and a spiritual practice, is that you are connecting with the images and symbols that are the most potent to you, that bring out the most powerful feelings of devotion and awe and reverence and so on. And that you feel completely free to express your inner self in however you want, whatever way you want to in your religious practice. This is probably different if you're kind of doing group practice or if it's a community or anything like that. But honestly, like, if your religious practice is private and personal and happening in the space of your own home, like, the world is your oyster. It really, really is. And you don't have to worry necessarily about insulting other people if you're not kind of shoving your beliefs or your practices necessarily in their face. It really can be a completely private and secret and personal practice that you have yourself. If that makes you feel more safe and more able and willing to be a magpie with religious symbolism and imagery and really draw that all in together. The place that this becomes problematic is that a lot of people like to have labels, and I talked about this. I'm not sure if it was the introduction video or the video on the divine, but I think it was the introduction video. I did kind of touch on that fact that humans like to be part of a community, and I think that's absolutely fine. I mean, for example, I consider myself to be a pagan and part of the pagan community. I consider myself to be a pantheist and part of the wider pantheist community. But when you actually look at my practice or whatever, it's not necessarily, I don't think it definitely doesn't only include those things, and it definitely doesn't include everything that those ideas or traditions or religious practices or beliefs encompass. I mean, particularly paganism is just an umbrella term anyway. So I would say that you definitely can build up a kind of religious identity for yourself without having to ascribe wholesale to everything that path or that tradition prescribes. I think you can definitely feel an affinity to a certain community of people that you feel have the closest kind of spiritual experiences and spiritual feelings to you, without actually just feeling like you're being hemmed in or kept from experimenting with other religious symbolism at the same time. Another thing that I would say that kind of ties in with that is the idea of using the symbolism of a religion that maybe you were raised with, but that isn't actually your chosen religion at this time. Now, different people will feel very differently about this. Some people will have had very bad experiences in that religion. They won't want to have anything to do with it, and it might not necessarily make you feel nurtured and connected and whole and all of that good stuff. But if you find that there is maybe, one piece of imagery or one symbol from that religion that you maybe were around a lot as a child, or that you just have encountered at some point in your life, and maybe its beliefs and its dogma has nothing to do with you, but the symbol actually has meaning for you, go with that. You can absolutely, like I say, pick and choose symbols and ascribe meaning to them yourself, because whatever they evoke within you, that is what they mean to you. Now, again, I will say to be careful about this if you're going around throwing these symbols at other people and saying, this is what this symbol means. That's not what this is about, and that is where things get complicated and religious stuff just gets messy and all of that stuff. But like I say, when we're talking about a personal, private religious practice, you can just go mad and you can do this, and it doesn't matter, because the idea of a symbol holding one particular meaning, first of all, it does to some extent exist in the human mind. We, because of the collective unconscious, because of just our collective heritage, and that we all share a certain amount of DNA. Our brains are very, very similar in a lot of ways. So we do have very similar responses to a lot of different imagery and symbolism. But the idea of a symbol holding the exact same meaning for everybody is really only important when it comes to communication and language and that kind of thing. That's how language was born. And I think that when you're talking to other people, it is important to kind of, to some extent, stick with the kind of the chosen meaning of certain symbols and certain words, because otherwise everything's going to get a bit confused. But when you're talking about your inner terrain, as long as you're consistent to some degree with yourself, and as long as you know what you mean by a certain symbol, then I think by all means use that symbol. And don't be afraid of using it. So a symbol could be anything as simple as, say, the sign of the cross from Christianity, the Holy Trinity in Christianity, to something a lot more specific, like a particular prayer, a particular story, a particular practice, or, you know, anything like that, a particular story from mythology or anything. And I think that a lot of the time, the religion that you were raised with, if it hasn't got like really terrible kind of connotations for you, you will have imbibed that symbolism at a very early age, and some of your first experiences of feeling reverence and awe will be connected with that symbolism and that imagery, and kind of incorporating that into your practice now might actually be the best way for you to unlock that feeling of devotion and awe. I think that's probably enough to go with for the moment, but I imagine that religious symbolism is something that I will come back to again and again in this series, because it is the spine of your spiritual practice. Everything will kind of keep coming back to that, because at the end of the day, this is how your ideas are expressed in images, in concepts, and this is the way that you can start to connect to your unconscious and connect your beliefs to actual practices and to things that you can look at and experience in the physical realm. So I hope that was useful. As usual, if you have any questions or specific things that you want me to get into, leave them in the comments below. I will absolutely be getting to all of those questions and stuff eventually down the line. Things have been a bit kind of very hectic for me over the last couple of weeks, but I'm hoping that at some point in January, February, if I have a bit more time on my hands, that I'll be able to focus even more on this series and really kind of getting a lot of honed kind of material out there for you guys to really help you on this journey. So I hope that was interesting. I hope you're all really well, and I will be talking to you again before then, but I hope you have a really wonderful Christmas. Oh, I mightn't actually be talking to you again before the solstice, so have a wonderful, wonderful midwinter, Yule, solstice, whatever it is that you're celebrating. I hope you have a really wonderful time. Talk to you again soon.